In 1923, inside Cairo's Continental Hotel, a wealthy British lord lay in a coma. His fever was raging, his breathing labored. At 1:55 in the morning, he drew his last breath. But what happened next was stranger than anyone could explain. At that exact moment, the entire city of Cairo went dark. Every light, every street lamp, gone. Thousands of miles away in England, the Lord's pet dog suddenly began howling, and then, without warning, dropped dead. Months earlier, this man had opened a tomb that had been sealed for 3,000 years. Carved near the entrance of that tomb was a warning: death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the peace of the king. Over the next 6 years, 22 people connected to that tomb would die. A radiologist, a secretary's father who fell from a 6th-floor window, scientists who had examined the mummy. One by one, they were gone. The world had a name for it: the curse of the pharaoh. But this story begins not with death. It begins with obsession. November 1922, the Valley of the Kings, Egypt. British archaeologist Howard Carter and his crew were digging through sand and stone, searching for a pharaoh whose name had been erased from history. That pharaoh was Tutankhamun. Carter was no elite scholar. His father painted animals for the aristocracy. As a child, Carter was too sick for school. The only thing he inherited from his father was a single paintbrush. At 17, a British lord noticed Carter's watercolors and sent him to Egypt. That lord was George Herbert, the 5th Earl of Carnarvon. Over 15 years, Lord Carnarvon had spent nearly £50,000 funding excavations in Egypt. In today's money, that's tens of millions of dollars. 15 years, £50,000, and nothing to show for it. Carnarvon told Carter plainly, this was the final season. No discovery meant no more funding. On November 4th, 1922, Carter arrived at the dig site to find an unusual stillness. His foreman reported that workers had uncovered a stone step cut into the bedrock. Carter's heart began to race. He ordered his men to dig faster. By the afternoon of November 5th, the rubble had been cleared. Before them stood a sealed doorway, plastered shut, bearing the seal of Anubis, the royal seal of the Valley of the Kings. But whose tomb was this? By November 24th, 16 steps had been cleared, and carved into that sealed door, unmistakably, was a name: Tutankhamun. November 26th, 1922. The day Carter would later call the most extraordinary of his life. He made a small hole in the sealed door. Warm air rushed out from the darkness, air that had been trapped for 3 millennia. Carter held a candle to the opening and peered inside. Lord Carnarvon stood behind him and asked, "Can you see anything?" Carter paused. Then he said, "Yes, wonderful things." Inside that tomb were 5,398 objects. A death mask of solid gold weighing 10 kilograms. A dagger forged from meteorite iron. Metal that had fallen from space. A solid gold coffin. 130 walking canes. Everything exactly as it had been left 3,000 years earlier in the immediate aftermath of a pharaoh's death. It was the greatest archaeological discovery in human history. But as the news spread, strange things began to happen. Carter kept a canary as a pet, a small golden bird. One day, shortly after the discovery, Carter's assistant was sent back to the house on an errand. When he arrived, he heard a sharp cry. He turned toward the birdcage. Inside it was a cobra, and in the cobra's mouth, the golden canary. For the people of Egypt, the cobra was the most powerful symbol of the pharaoh's authority. Word spread instantly. The curse had begun. Months later, on March 6th, a mosquito bit Lord Carnarvon on the cheek. The following morning, while shaving, he accidentally nicked the bite with his razor. The wound became infected. In the Egyptian heat, a fly landed on the open cut and the infection spread. Carnarvon developed a severe fever. His doctors ordered a strict diet and no alcohol. Carnarvon, being Carnarvon, opened another bottle of wine from his estate's collection. On April 5, 1923, at 1:55 in the afternoon, Lord Carnarvon died in his room at the Continental Hotel in Cairo. The circumstances surrounding his death only deepened the mystery. 12 days before his death, novelist Marie Corelli had written an open letter published in the Daily Express, warning Carnarvon directly. She claimed to possess a rare Arabic text that clearly stated severe punishment awaited anyone who entered a sealed royal tomb. A novelist issued a public warning. 12 days later, the man was dead. At the moment of Carnarvon's death, Cairo's entire power grid failed. When the British High Commissioner demanded an explanation from the electricity department, they had none. No technical fault was ever identified. That same night, back in England, Carnarvon's dog Susie howled and died. Even Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, declared that a malevolent spirit may have been responsible for Carnarvon's illness. If the man who invented the world's greatest detective believed in the curse, who could argue? The press seized on it. The Pharaoh's Curse, King Tut's Revenge. Headlines like these circled the globe, and the deaths kept coming. American financier George J. Gould visited the tomb and was dead of fever the very next day. British industrialist Joel Wool toured the burial chamber and died of fever shortly after. Carnarvon's half-brother, Aubrey Herbert, was dead within 6 months. Sir Archibald Douglas Reed, the radiologist who had X-rayed the mummy, died suddenly. Members of Carter's core team, Arthur Mace, Professor Breasted, 2 correspondents from the Times, all appeared on the growing list. Every time an Egyptologist or museum official died, regardless of age, regardless of cause, the newspapers had their headline ready. The curse claims another victim. The greatest irony of all? The man who had done the most to promote the curse in the press died of fever in Egypt himself. Now, here is where the story changes entirely. That inscription near the tomb entrance, "Death shall come on swift wings," never existed. When experts carefully examined the actual excavation writings, they found something that stopped them cold. The language did not resemble ancient Egyptian at all. Those words belonged to Marie Corelli, the novelist, not to ancient Egypt. The entire inscription had been fabricated. Decades later, Richard Adamson, the head of security at the excavation, confirmed it plainly. No such inscription was ever found. A journalist had asked about curses during the dig. Adamson admitted he had smiled and said nothing to contradict the story. Think about that for a moment. The most famous curse in human history was born from a reporter's imagination and one man's silence. In 1933, German Egyptologist Professor Steindorf conducted a thorough investigation into every death associated with the tomb. His conclusion: there was no meaningful connection between them. In 1963, Dr. Ezzedine Taha of Cairo University examined archaeologists and museum workers and found that many were infected with a fungus called Aspergillus niger, a mold that had survived inside these sealed tombs for thousands of years. Exposure caused severe respiratory inflammation. And here is the part that should give you pause. It could have been treated with antibiotics. In other words, the curse could have been cured at a pharmacy. In 2002, the British Medical Journal published a formal scientific study of the curse. Researchers identified 44 Westerners who had been present in Egypt during the tomb's opening. 25 had direct exposure to the burial chamber. 19 had none. The result? No statistically significant difference in life expectancy between the two groups. Researcher James Randi went further. The average age of death among the so-called cursed individuals was 73 years. slightly above average for their social class. If anything, the pharaoh's curse was extending people's lives. The two most dramatic pieces of evidence, Cairo's blackout and the death of the dog, also fall apart under scrutiny. Power failures in 1920s Cairo were entirely routine. The timing was coincidence, nothing more. And Susie the dog? The reported time of her death did not align with Carnarvon's death at all. Once you account for the time zones, the story had simply been told wrong. Now consider this final question. If the curse was real, who should have died first? Number 3 on that list, Lady Evelyn Herbert, Carnarvon's own daughter, one of the very first people to enter the tomb. She died in 1980 at the age of 78. Number 2, Douglas Derry, the man who physically unwrapped the mummy and performed the autopsy. He died in 1961 at 87 years old. And number 1, Howard Carter himself, the man who found the tomb, broke the seal, and removed the mummy of Tutankhamun with his own hands. Carter lived until 1939. 16 years after the discovery, he died at 64 of cancer, with no connection to the tomb whatsoever. For years, people would ask him about the curse. Carter always gave the same answer: "I am still here." Now, who was the boy in that tomb? Tutankhamun's father, Pharaoh Akhenaten, had shaken Egypt to its foundation. He abolished centuries of polytheism and declared that only one god, Aten, the sun, would be worshipped. Temples were closed. Priests were stripped of their power. The entire religious order of Egypt was dismantled. After Akhenaten's death, a child of 8 or 9 years old was placed on the throne. His name was Tutankhaten, meaning living image of Aten. But when he reversed his father's religious reforms, he changed his name to Tutankhamun, living image of Amun. His reign was brief. He died at just 18 or 19 years of age. Egypt's royal dynasties had practiced inbreeding for generations, marriages between siblings, repeated across centuries. The genetic consequences were severe. Tutankhamun suffered from clubfoot, both feet severely deformed. He had Kolar disease, a condition causing intense bone pain. Without support, he could not walk a single step unaided. That is why 130 walking canes were buried with him. When scientists examined his mummy, they also found evidence of malaria. It was the combination of these conditions, not a curse, not an assassin, that killed him at 18. He was considered so insignificant by the kings who followed that they deliberately erased his name from every official record. That erasure is precisely what saved his tomb from looters. No one knew he was there. For 3,000 years, the world had completely forgotten him. And then a painter's son brushed away the sand and gave an 18-year-old king back to history. Today, Tutankhamun is the most recognized pharaoh in the world. The ancient Egyptians believed a person truly died only when their name was spoken for the last time. The kings who came after Tutankhamun tried to make that happen. They failed. His name will never be forgotten, and perhaps, like Howard Carter once said of himself, Tutankhamun too can say that. Because of one stubborn man with a paintbrush and a dream, he is still